we are going to discuss about the second issue, identity and individuality. And for the first issue, I think our panelists took some time because to explain their traditions. So, discussing the second issue, I think we should take shorter time because already traditions are explained. So, second issue is identity and individuality. The concept of identity and individuality of objects attracted a lot of attention to the physicists and philosophers in 20th century since the discovery of statistics, of counting of quantum entities like electrons, protons, etc. Identity and individuality have been discussed by philosophers for many centuries. It is generally considered that chairs, trees, rocks, people, and many of the so-called everyday objects we encounter can be regarded as individuals. The issue then is how this individuality is to be understood or what constitutes principle of individuality. Leibniz states that no two distinct things exactly resemble each other. This is known as Leibniz law. The identity of indiscernible, which may mean that no two objects have exactly the same property. Recent works on the interpretation of quantum mechanics suggest the principle of identity of indiscernible fails in the quantum domain. And I will not elaborate further on this issue because I have already given the write-up to the panelists. So what is the question? I'm making short because of we are running late, and the guiding questions for dialogue in physics, both in classical as well as in quantum domain, the property like charge, spin, etc. considered to be intrinsic property of the object. In Buddhist philosophy, especially in Madhyamik philosophy, no such concept of intrinsic property or svabhava exists in contrast to the Vedantic view. So, what are the views on identity and individuality of objects according to various traditions? Anyone? Okay.
They represent the Vedantic point of view. The individual is the I. And how does the I come about is a question which has been discussed in Vedanta elaborately. So the answer which they have found is I is a spurious notion which arises when consciousness comes in contact with matter. They call it Chid Jada Granthi, the knot which ties on the one hand Jada, which is pure matter, and the other consciousness which is Chaitanya. Chid Jada Granthi, when it comes, there is a spurious notion of I, and this I has no specific locus. Suppose you are asked, are you well? Oh, I am not so well. What's happened to you? I have a toothache. Your tooth is aching and you say, I am not well. Your tooth are not well, and therefore you say, that means you identify yourself with your teeth. Then you say, I'm not well, your mind is not well, you feel upset or something. So the I identifies itself with the body, with the senses, with the mind, and with the intellect, and so on. So there is no specific locus of this I. So what is this I has been questioned repeatedly. This is what the individual. Who is this individuality? Identity. Now the question of identity, now I am very fond of football. So playing football, I break my leg. I have a very important match after 2 days. So I am in the hospital, resting, I can't play the game, and I'm very upset about it. And suddenly I shout in the dead of night, goal! So what has happened to you? I scored a goal in dream. I scored a goal in dream is wrong because I am now with a fractured leg, but I feel identical with the person who scored the goal, and the doctor comes and gives me a sedative, and then they go to sleep. And in deep sleep, the experiences of my waking state and in my deep sleep state, my dream state are completely negated. So which is the real I? But I feel the I is identical in the waking and the dreaming and the deep sleep state. So the Vedantic idea is there is a super I, which is called Avasthatraya Sakshi, which witnesses all these traits experience, and participates in the experiences of all these three states and assumes that it is the experience of the one and the same person. So this individuality, therefore, is a spurious notion which comes up when the supreme I, they call it the Atman, they call it the Brahman, they call it by any name, the supreme I which operates through three modes of individuals as the waking, dreaming and a deep sleep. And this witness I, which is a non-participatory supreme ego, but allows the participation of the three modes in the three states of existence. I'll just end, because we are running short of time, with a very interesting anecdote from Swami Vivekananda's life. There was a French actress, her name was Emma Calvé. She was a great celebrity in those days. As most of celebrities are, she was very upset, she was very unhappy, extremely frustrated, almost contemplating ending her life. Somebody told her there's a great Indian yogi in Paris, you can go and meet him, he perhaps would help you. So he made an appointment with him and then went to meet him. Swami Vivekananda did not even look at her. She says, what a terrible atmosphere you brought with you, my child. Calm down, calm down. She sat down. Vivekananda started talking about some of the deepest secrets of her life which she had not shared with anybody in her life. She was flabbergasted, confused, frightened. Is it magic? Is it mesmerism? Swami, what are you doing to me? How did you know all this? Did anybody talk to you about me? Swami Vivekananda smiled and said, is it necessary? I can read you like an open book. Then Swami Vivekananda gave her a different idea of her own individuality. He told her, you are not an individual yet, the Vedantic view of the individuality. You are not an individual, you are that universal, imagining yourself to be an individual, encased in this little body and mind, going through all these great experiences. You are that universal. Go back to your universality to recover your individuality. So the Vedantic idea is we can be individuals only when we realize ourselves as the universal. That impulse was a little too much for that lady. She found that her individuality was just vanishing. She cried out, Swami, what are you doing to me? I am losing myself. I can't take it anymore. Then Swami Vivekananda smiled and told a story with which I'll end. He said, a water drop was falling into the ocean. The drop was crying bitterly. The ocean asked the drop, why are you crying, my child? Oh, I am now going to lose my individuality as the drop. The ocean smiled and said, my child, you are not losing your individuality as the water drop. You are regaining your individuality as the ocean. You were the ocean. You were one with your billions and trillions of sisters and brothers who are water drops like you, went up the sky and are coming back to regain your individuality. A real individuality, according to Vedanta, is the universality which manifests wrongly as the individuality, and we feel that we are individuals cut out from the universal. Once we reunite with the universal and realize our universal nature, our real identity as the individual is re-established.
Okay, let us now listen our views from Madhyamik philosophy, from Geshe, Dorji, Damdul, regarding Svabhava or intrinsic property and individuality.
Again, thank you very much. So this topic is again very important topic, and from what is how the question is designed from there, I would see that it needs a little bit of explanation. So to make it very quick, individuality, and the topic is the individuality and identity. Okay, so let us say that we look at this beautiful plant. We look at this beautiful plant, and then what emotional reactions come to your mind? So we're talking about the individuality of the plant, or the whatever. So that when we react to the object, when we interact with the object, then it's very pleasant. It's a very nice plant. So what happens is there's the object there, the flower is the object, and your mind is the subject. And the interaction between the two gives you a sense of feeling. Now, if you see the same plant through electron microscope, you will just see the atoms, or you will just see the molecules. And none of the molecules is beautiful as this plant. So now, what we are doing is that we are seeing the same object in a different way. Okay, then the question arises, what is the real identity of this object? Whether it is the one which gives you the appeal sense, or the one which gives you a sense of just neutrality, which is the real identity of this object? This is a question. Okay, so from this, we come to one thing which we need to know so well, and very important, is that how the object exists. Whether it is the plant, whether it's the molecules, which of the two. So it entirely depends on how you perceive that. With your naked eyes, you see that as a plant, and that is true, it's a plant. And with your microscopic eyesight, you will see this as just a bunch of molecules. This is also true. Both are true. So these are the two realities. These are the two realities. Now, from this, what we come to know is that what is objective reality here? It is all perception. Now, Nagarjuna, who commented on the Buddha Shakyamuni's teaching, that from the object side, nothing really exists. Nothing. Everything exists only through dependent origination. By dependence on the perceiving mind, things come into being. Okay, from this point of view, now we come to know that what is the objective reality? Or let's say, what is the ontological reality? So there, we keep in mind two things. Are you a strict philosopher, strict scientist, or who likes to enjoy the world? If you are the one who likes to enjoy the world, okay, I'm a part of the world. So from that point of view, this is a plant. And so this big plant is by dependence on your eyesight, which sees the world as what it is to your eyes now. Okay, so from this we see that what is there as individuality? What is there as, for example, even with this plant, there's individuality. That is a plant. Or the molecules is a molecule and so forth. Now from this point of view, swabhava, or the absence of swabhava. When you speak about the swabhava, it doesn't mean that, say, the fire is never cold. The fire, whether you call it intrinsic nature, its undeniable nature is the hot. Hotness is the undeniable nature of the fire. Had it not been hot, it is not fire. So therefore, as long as something is fire, it is always hot. As long as you are a being, you have a sense of happiness, sense of misery. So these are whether you call it intrinsic, strictly from Buddhist point of view, particularly when you go deep into the philosophy, then even this understanding of the intrinsicality, there are so many layers to peel off. So subtlest version of the intrinsicality is the objectivity. So objectivity, what is objective reality? Absence of the objectivity is the objective reality of the phenomena. So this is a little philosophical. So what I'm saying is that when the objective existence is rejected, is purely subjective, it does not, at the same time, it does not reject that the atoms assume the nature of the particle, atoms assume the nature of the energy. This is not rejected. As long as something is the matter, it should be either physical matter or energy. This is not rejected. At the same time, as long as it's a flower, say, as long as it is a fire, it should be hot. And as long as it is an electron, it should have a spin. Up spin, down spin. These are undeniable facts. So we should distinguish between the intrinsic quality and the undeniable qualities. So undeniable qualities, they determine what the object is. So that is not rejected. Thank you.
So let us listen what if Kashmir Shaivism, they can say something on that.
I'll be very brief because I know I took too much time. Now, essentially, Shiva is omniscient, endowed with all the powers, sarvagyas and many other powers. And when his power contracts, that it's called Swarup Gopana or Atma Sankocha, that when that supreme energy or vibration contracts, and wails, there is wailing, self-wailing, and through that self-wailing, Shiva becomes a sansarin, because there's only one reality. We are all Shivas. We are all Shiva and Shaktis. So through self-wailing, he becomes Anu by the activation of the three malas. I'm just giving you the philosophical point of view. The three impurities. And these three impurities is Anava Mala, Mayayi Mala, and Karma Mala. And through them, the individuality comes into being, and you forget your link with the ultimate consciousness, which is supreme, whole in all respects. And then one begins to individuate, so to speak. Now, what is interesting is that there's a wonderful aphorism about it. Pasha Baddha Pashu. Pashu is really another word for Jiva. Pasha Baddha Pashu, Pasha Mukta Sadashiva. So what are the Pashas? Pasha is the Maya Shakti which veils the immensity and the Sarvagyata of Shiva in all dimensions. Because ultimately the knower and the known, Pramatri and Prameya, are the same. There is one reality. But because of this veiling, because of this Atma Gopana and Atma Sankocha, contraction, even when they describe how the universe comes into being from the immensity of Shiva and Shakti, it contracts. So the way Kashmir Shaivism looks at the concept of Maya is very different. It's from the root Ma, to measure. He measures out something which is infinite. He becomes Shuddha, small, in that sense. And therefore, he's referred as Pashu, as Jiva. Now, another interesting concept is, of course, the notion of matrikas, because they explain the evolution of the universe also through Shabda Srishti. And yesterday, Professor Jha has so well explained the play of language and Sanskrit, and how, a huge philosophy of language has been built up. Now, according to them, there are 4 stages of sound: Paravak, Pashyanti, Madhyama, and Vaikari. Vaikari is articulated speech. And articulated speech consists of matrikas, which are the alphabets of the Sanskrit language. And it's a wonderful view which is being put forward, that conditioned selfhood through the limited knowledge of matrikas. Conditioned selfhood is brought about through the limited knowledge of the matrikas, letters of the alphabets. They are the instruments of language and communication, and the limited empirical self falls victim to the cacophony and multitude of words. And this is something which Swamiji had also notion: I'm fat, I'm thin, I'm beautiful, I'm ugly, and all that. So basically, when you are in that realm of dichotomizing consciousness, you split everything, at the mind, at the level of the mind, and that splitting or describing the world or the self through words itself is a form of individuation. So the powers inherent in letters are ever ready to wail. And these matrikas, also known as goddesses, who always sort of, attracting you to wail your real self. So they are ready to wail the essential nature of the real self, because all the ideas that bring about individuation cannot arise without the use of words. And therefore, there is a notion of individuation, but within that, there's also a notion of identity, unitive identity. So because the integral nature of the absolute is that it is Chit, therefore it is above the nature of microcosm and macrocosm in that sense. Consciousness is all pervasive. Now, consciousness pervades in bodies. There is no difference in it anywhere. Therefore, contemplating on identity of one's essence, one can conquer the repeated round of birth and death, which is brought about by the malas. So I have these quotes if any of you want it. So Shiva embodied in the body is Jiva, unembodied Supreme Shiva. So they would take the point of view that, we are all Shivas, we are all Shaktis, but we have forgotten ourselves, because we have forgotten our immensity, we have forgotten our infinite potential. We've also forgotten consciousness which resides within us, which is also immense and diverse, at the same time unitive. We've also forgotten the three aspects of Ichha, Gyan and Kriya, and the unitive, the phenomenology of consciousness we've not understood, and we've forgotten the Ananda that arises out of this unitive consciousness.
Thank you. I know that there is a great debate with Jain scholars and Buddhist scholars, and famous Jain scholar Ramachandra, he discussed elaborately identity, difference, etc. So now I will request Professor Bhandari to say something on that.
It's a tricky question, but we can approach it from the point of view of Anekantvad, that everything has a substance and a mode. According to Jainism, the identity is because of the mode, and it is changing all the time. And the individuality is the substrate or the basic thing. I'll explain it from 2 points of view. Take, for example, the universe, and it's made of Parmanu, as I explained. Now you can have infinite number of Parmanus in a unit space. Now their identity is similar, but still they are individual. So the identity is lost, but as you go to pure and pure state, the individuality still remains. And the same is true of the soul. This the identity of soul in terms of different jiva, or it is me or it is you, this comes because of the impurity or the karmas. Once they are shed, all souls become identical, but they still remain individual because they have two properties, two faculties which still operate in the pure state. One is to know and one is to see. Gyan and darshan, as they say. So, although all souls are identical, they are individual because they are at a different state of seeing and knowing at a particular moment. So, the identity, as I said, x is equal to s plus m, identity is because of m, the paryaya, which keep on changing all the time, but being so slow, we still identify it as persistent, whereas individuality or the substrate of that is due to the substantial phase, which is eternal and doesn't change. So that is all I have to say in this context.
Okay, thank you. And now let us listen what our panelists say on yoga philosophy.
Individual identity and individual difference, it is defined on the basis of Triguna Vyavastha in yoga, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. It is very much elaborated in 16th and 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. 12 aspects are separately projected. Sattva-based yajna, sattva-based shraddha, sattva-based karma, sattva-based karyakarta, sattva-based jnana, sattva-based, like that. That is likewise raja-based, tamas-based. But according to Vyasamuni Bhashya on Yoga Sutra, we can classify individuals as kshipta, mudha, vikshipta, ekagra, niruddha. When rajas will be predominant, tamas is supporting, mind becomes boiling. When tamas is predominant, then it docile, mind becomes so docile. When it is sometime sattvic, sometime tamasic, sometime rajasic, it is vikshipta, depending upon the conditioning factors outside and inside. And when it comes to the ekagra level, sattva will be predominant and all these two will be subsidiary, so that mind becomes one-pointed, man gets that sublimated condition at his emotional level. That is what very important. Emotional sublimations. When that climax of this is achieved, when man crosses that bondage of Triguna Vyavastha and even tries to go beyond and attain that gunatita, there man goes to that purest form of mind, very transparent condition of the mind, that is called niruddha condition, where samadhi sthiti becomes very much very close to him. That is the climax of achievement. That is how this identity, individual identity and its expansion of individuality, all these are defined on the basis of Triguna Vyavastha. Om.
Okay, thank you. Now we are moving to third issues, time, causality and consciousness. I'll briefly elaborate the issue because we don't have much time. So, time and consciousness have been extensively discussed by various schools of Indian philosophy. For example, in Shankha philosophy, problem of time coincides the problem of change. The pattern of conceiving changes in this system with reference to underlying substratum called Prakriti is different from the Buddhist conception of change. The postulate of two principles, Purusha and Prakriti, as ultimate and ontologically independent of one another is highly important for study of time and consciousness. In yoga philosophy, ideas of Khanna and karma, that is moment, instant and sequence, have been discussed in Yoga Sutra 3. In the commentary of Vyasa it is said, just as the atom is the minimal limit of matter, so the moment is the minimal duration taken by an atom to change its positions. More, yoga advocates the doctrine, the discrete view of time. The atomic concept of time has been extensively discussed in joint text, where the time atoms are distinct and can never be mixed up. This is brought out by saying that Kalo has no pradesha, Kalo has one pradesha only, that is time atoms can never be combined. This indicates the difference between atoms of space, matter and from that of time. There exist internal differences regarding the doctrine of momentariness within Buddhist tradition. A dialectical analysis of the problem of the time has been discussed in Nagarjuna's Mulamadhyamikarika, which has been further elaborated by Chandrakirti. The aim was to expose the untenability not only of any idea of time as unitary and absolute, but also on the notion of the reality of time as instant. In an Advaitin, the reality of time as represents ontological category is considered to be wholly superfluous. So, the questions for the dialogue is, various Indian schools of philosophy discussed about the instant of time or Khanna, as well as the existence of smallest unit of time, the ontology of space-time as network of relations, cause and effect relationships have been studied by various Indian schools for many centuries. But now the question is, what are the views on smallest unit of time or duration as well as instant? I mean, the idea of smallest unit of time or atomistic unit of time in comparison to Khanna or instant of time, and also the ontology of space and time from various traditions. Okay.
Space, time are one unit, and causality obviously follows time, because causality means before and after. That which goes before is the cause, and that which comes later is the effect. And before and later obviously are temporal concepts. Now the fundamental question which has been discussed in philosophy, particularly in the Vedantic philosophy, there is only one substance which appears as the many, And is the appearance real? How did it come about? There are various questions which have been asked. Now, how does the one become the many? There are several points of view. One is the one suddenly thought I should become many. That's the view some of the Upanishads mentioned, that he was feeling very lonely and said, let me become many. Then the question is asked, why did he suddenly feel very lonely and become many and then create all these problems? We were very happy alone, and then we choose to get companions, and then now we are restless to communicate with them with all kinds of WhatsApps and tutors and bring all the problems in the world. So the one becomes the many. One point of view which has been projected, the one becomes the many through space, time and causation. Space-time causation is what is known as relativity or Maya, and the one and the absolute projected through the prism of space, time and causation becomes the many. Then the question is asked, is it possible to have a state of consciousness in which time and space completely vanish? And you still survive. It is before death, of course. After death, you do not know what's going to happen to you. Then Vedanta says, why don't you look at your own experience? Vedanta is a philosophy which doesn't philosophize. It is not metaphysics, it is not philosophy, it is not religion. It is just a simple analysis of your daily experience and asking simple questions about your experience and coming out with very profound answers. The one is, I pass through certain states of experience. These can't be wished away because they are my experiences, which is the waking state when I see all of you. Then when I dream, my experience is completely different. The waking state experience is contradicted by dream experience, and both of them are contradicted by deep sleep experience, in which I feel no time, no space, no causation. And I come back again, of course. And therefore, it is possible to have a state of consciousness in which space, time, and causation completely vanish. Now the question is asked, is it possible to simulate that experience when you are actually awake, not when you are sleeping? So these questions have been asked, and in the recent times, I can think of Mahesh Yogi, for example, who talked about the transcendental meditation, which very simply perhaps would mean induce a sleep while being awake, which most of us did it for the last few days here, so that you get relaxed. Because all your lack of relaxation comes to you when you come to space, time and causation. When space, time, causation goes away, you are absolutely in a state of pure relaxation. So the technique is, even when you are awake, you temporarily for a few seconds suspend your consciousness as it were and lapse into a deep state of sleep, and then from which you gain energy and come back. And very recently, J. Krishnamurti, for example, used to talk about psychological time and chronological time. The chronological time is by the clock, which the organizers always look at, and the panelists don't. This is by the clock, you have to go by the clock. And you have the psychological time, which doesn't obey the clock, and the psychological time transcends actually the chronological time. The psychological time is memory. So you store memory in that, and that memory guides you to certain paths which are not actually revealed by a reality. Now, what I was trying to say was that in the state of deep sleep, which some of the Upanishads in fact equate with samadhi, space and time actually vanish. So it is possible to have a state of consciousness in which space, time and causation actually vanish. So now, what is the difference between samadhi and deep sleep that has been discussed? There is the veil of ignorance which is covering this. So the conclusion of Vedanta is that space, time and causation are not essential to consciousness. They come into consciousness to project the relative world, and it is possible to have a state of awareness in which space, time and causation could be transcended. In that state of transcendence, space, time and consciousness are actually subsumed into something which is higher. In fact, the Lord himself, the Supreme Reality, has been described as Mahakala. You know, the Bhagavad Gita, the 11th chapter, when Arjuna was terribly frightened by seeing the Vishwarupa, the universal form, he said, who are you? I can't really place, where are you? Who are you? Then he said, Kalosmi loka kshayagrat pravarto, I am the supreme Kala. So Shiva, I'll just end with this imagery. Time flows, as we know, from the past through the present into the future. So you have the light cone in which you have the infinite past and the infinite future, and now is just a point. So Shiva is pictured as holding that point in the Damaru and then manipulating the past and the present. If you can arrest time in the present, now you are in a state of consciousness in which you transcend space-time.
Thank you. We know that great Buddhist scholar Nagarjuna, there is a chapter called Kalopariksha in Mula Madhyamaya Kalika. He has extensively discussed a concept of time. So let us listen from Geshe, Dorji, Damdul.
Okay, this topic, what we have is time, causality, and consciousness. So I'm not going to elaborate too much to make it very concise. Say, in Buddhist philosophy, everything that exists you can think of in this universe is divided into two: composite phenomena and non-composite phenomena. Composite meaning which is composed of particles, which is composed of momentary segments of the mind. These are known as composite phenomena. And whereas on the other hand we have non-composite phenomena, say the space, even the akasha, the space. Even the space is of two kinds. One is composite space and the other one is non-composite. I don't want to go into detail with this. So those of you who are interested, I would be happy to share with you later on. So they say non-composite space and other things, they fall in the category of the non-composite phenomena. Now the composite phenomena, because they are composite, they are under the fabric of causation. Composite phenomena, they are under the fabric of causation. So this is one of the topic. Now within this causation, within this cause-effect relationship, again there are two kinds. Natural cause-effect relationship and a cause-effect relationship determined by the mental intention. Natural cause-effect relationship and a cause-effect relationship determined by the mental intention. For example, say you plant a flower and then say after 2-3 days it withers, it dies. That is a natural cause-effect relationship. Whereas say you keep this bottle here and then there's the earthquake and the bottle falls. This bottle will not come back, but then with my intention I can bring it back. So that is known as the cause effect. The bottle coming back is the result because of my intention plus the bottle being there on the floor. So combined together it becomes a cause effect conjoined with the intention. So now within this intention, cause effect governed by the intention, that intention becomes a part of the consciousness in Buddhist psychology. So consciousness is an English word. In fact, the Indian classical traditions like Buddhism, then Jainism, Vedanta, I don't think they have the full legitimacy to say that consciousness means this, that, and so forth. This is an English word, so we have to check with the English linguists. Anyway, in a loose sense, Buddhists would equate consciousness and the mind. So one. Now, from what I read from the basic synopsis here of the topic, I see that there is what is known as the partless time, concept of the partless time, according to the other traditions. In fact, in Buddhism, Buddhist school of thought is divided into four. Four schools of thought are there. The first two schools, they are actually arranged in a progressive way, progressively more advanced way. The first two schools, they believe in partless moment of the time, partless temporal time, temporal segment. Whereas the higher two schools, they, in a nice way, they don't accept that. In a very direct way, they reject this. So how they reject is, for example, there is a mention of what is known as how the brain, in this text, there is a mention of how the brain requires a specific amount of time to see the phenomena, to see phenomena. And so that time would be atom time in this particular context, in the context of how the brain perceives the object. Whereas time per se, it is much can be broken down subtler than that. For example, the standard unit of time, I think was established by the science, physics, on the basis of one chemical cesium, if I'm not wrong. This was like 20, 30 years what was studied. So why cesium was selected is because its change is very stable as compared to others. It's not intrinsically the reliable change. Even there, the change is there, but the change is so minimal. So now that minimal change connotes time. So that minimal change is much less than nanoseconds. So that way, so that time is much shorter than the time span given as, say, the time to perceive an object. So from that point of view, okay, I'll stop here. Thank you.
We know that there is a great text in Kashmir Shaivism, Swandokarika, where concept of Swando was introduced, and we physicists are very much eager to know whether that Swando has any connections with concept of time, what we say in modern physics.
Thank you very much. Yeah, well, there are one or two concepts that we have to understand. One is that, you know, when we look at the concept of time, time is not linear but cyclical. This is a very important thing, and it is within this nature that, you know, it moves in a cycle. So when we talk of the two major absolute principles, which is essentially one, Shiva and Shakti, there is no such thing in this notion as absolute status or absolute dynamism. That you can't say that it's in absolute terms, that things are just moving because we believe in spandan, so everything is moving all the time. No, there is status and dynamism simultaneously, so which is a unique concept. Now, so the point of status is inherent in the active emergent state, and on the other hand, it is the innate nature of the active Shakti to resolve into Vishranti, into status. So the absolute revels in the divine splendor of status and dynamism. So there is, when you look at the Desh Krama and the Kala Krama, there's a beautiful passage in Ishwar Pratibhigya Vimarshini, which I just want to talk about. Now, this idea of duality and unity is expressed in terms of time, and it talks about spanda, and I quote that, vibration, spanda, or pulsation of consciousness means subtle movement. It's not this movement, you know. It's not even the way the plants sway that, you know, we cognize movement in day-to-day life. It is subtle movement. Now, how do they explain this subtle movement? It is subtle in the sense that although it moves not. That is the spanda point of view. Although it moves not. It manifests as motion or vibration. The light of consciousness is identical with manifestation, yet it appears to be separate. That which is immobile is associated with variegated manifestation, which manifests as forms of movement, temporal and spatial. So this idea of movement and stasis is central. Now the other important concept is sankoch and vikas. That, you know, when you think of time, it's because the universe is going on all the time, you know, and there is expansion. The cosmic process consists of cyclic series of creations, that is emanation, expansions, and involutions or contractions. And the word they use is sankoch, contraction. And vikas, prasara, the other word is prasara, expanding. They also use the word samhar in some places. So it is, firstly it is krama and akramika. It has sequence, it does not have sequence. Then another interesting, and this concept could be linked with the modern ideas that we're talking about, is simultaneity, which I found to be quite unique. And this is held by the Krama systems, Spanda, Pratibhigya and Sri Vidya, all the schools. Shiva and Shakti are eternally engaged in all the phases of emanation and involution simultaneously. So simultaneity becomes a good, important notion, and yet perform them separately. The first form of activity can be broken down into sequential order in time and space, and the second into akramika. So in other words, Srishti, which is the word for creation, has samhara and sthiti in it. Sthiti has Srishti as sthiti in it, and samhara krama would have sthiti and shrishti in it. it's that combination which they talk about.
Okay.
And this is also explained visually in their mandalas, how the 9 chakras, each of them contains the other
Thank
two.
you. And we know that in physics, we have a smallest duration of time called Planck time, that is 10 to the minus 43 second. And also in brain, there is a quanta of time or smallest duration of time called associated with gamma rhythm of the brain. So now we know that the atomic concept of time has been extensively discussed in Jain philosophy. So let us listen what Jain philosophy says.
Well, all these three, consciousness, time and causality, are very core of Jainism. So let me try to present what the Jain philosophy says about it. Let me take first the case of time. So as I mentioned in the introductory summary, we can approach this problem from what we call standpoint or Nayavad. So there is an absolute way of looking at it and there is a practical way of looking at it. So absolute is Nishchay Nay and practical is Vyavhar Nay. There are many other Nays, but I am just going to take these two to explain about time. So time, according to Jainism, is made of Kalanu, and Kalanu is a smallest unit of time. It is defined as the time taken by one Parmanu to go from one space point to another. So space point is defined, Pradesha, and Parmanu of course moves with various velocities. They have given a large range of velocities, but when it moves from slowest velocity from one Pradesha to another, that time taken is defined as Samay, is the smallest unit of time, is equivalent to Kalanu. So that is the Nishchay, and it is supposed to be, they have not given absolute one, I will come to it, but much smaller than Planck time. So I am surprised how we can reconcile physics with this. It's much smaller than the physics time. But they, unlike physics, which only ascribe motion and sequence of events to time, time has 4 functions. One is a function of becoming, another is transformation, the third is motion, and fourth is sequence of events. So these 4 phenomena are ascribed to the effect of time. Now what happens, as I told in the beginning, there are these substances, the Akash, the soul, the Pudgal, the matter, or Parmanu, Dharmastikaya, and so on. So time, the absolute time, I am not talking of practical time, we have to distinguish it from practical time. The absolute time intrinsically works on all this. When it acts on soul, it gives the phenomena of becoming. See, compared to physics, which only deals with material part, Jainism deals with living as well as non-living. So becoming is an effect of time on soul. Transformation is the effect of time on matter, on Parmanu. Motion is the effect of time on Dharmastikaya. And sequence of events is the effect of time on Akash. This is how it is defined. So time is not really an independent substance as it is, as the others are, but it becomes part of them. I can't say this is embedded in the other substances, but it affects, the absolute time affects all these other substances, continuously affects without any external agency. So that is the Nishchay Kal, or what you call the absolute time. Now in practice, the absolute time is too small to measure or see its effect. So it becomes a time continuum. So continuum of time is due to the practical perspective of time. Now, as I said, the universe is made of these 6 substances which are coexisting as well as coextensive with the universe, and it is immersed in an infinite alokakash. The alokakash, that is the universe, is immersed in an infinite alokakash. So, inside this we have all the 6 substances, but outside we have only time and space. So time and space go together, time and matter go together, time and soul go together, time and dharmastika go together, and they affect, that is how time is understood. Now coming to the consciousness, actually much has been said about consciousness in the last few days, but the Jain point of view is entirely different. Brain is not the seat of consciousness, body is not the seat of consciousness. Consciousness is everywhere. They talk of a field, a Chaitanya, a Bodhi field they call it. And that will, if you assume, I don't know how to prove it or not, but if you assume that there is a conscious field all over the universe, then many phenomena can be explained, like what they talk about in consciousness, about the heart problem, how it becomes experience, or the binding problem, how all the information is united by brain, because it is already there. And the laws of this field, this Chidakash, or what Dr. Roy calls it, Chidakash, I guess, are different from the physical universe. So everything is known instantaneously. Information can flow in one samay or one kalanu from one end of the universe to the other, and so on. Such things are defined. So the consciousness, there's another point here I want to make. There is nothing like imperfect or levels of consciousness and so on in Jainism. Consciousness is perfect, always. Brain is only a tool of consciousness, and animal has a poorer tool or whatever, so that you don't manifest it fully. So it is the other way around. Consciousness is perfect. It knows everything. It can see everything, but it uses various tools to manifest itself. So if our sense organs are imperfect, our mind is imperfect, our brain is imperfect, we don't realize it fully. So it is this way they define the consciousness. So it has infinite knowledge, always has, whether we can realize or not. It has infinite darshan, infinite potency, infinite bliss, among several other infinite, I think about 47 are elaborated. I will not go into all of them. So it is not that consciousness appears spontaneously once you have a complicated neural network or something. I just heard about these ideas. But it is the consciousness is always there, uses the neural network as a instrument to visualize things and so on.
Yeah.
So the causality is, as we know in physics, is the very fundamental thing. There is no effect without a cause, and there is no cause which has no effect. But in Jainism, the scope is little wider. They also include the living beings, and that is where it is called karma shastra or karma. So nothing, because of this causality, there is no scope for chance or coincidences or luck or God or anything. All this is not there. It is pure and simple law. And there are these laws which are defined. So
maybe we can discuss in the next issue.
Sorry?
In connection with the next issue, we can discuss. You can discuss more. In connection with the next issue. The
next issue is ultimate reality.
No, metaphysics of relations.
Metaphysics of relations.
You can discuss more on this issue.
Okay. So anyway, before I finish, the causality actually collapses in one kalanu, in one samay, you can't have causality. This causality requires past, present and future. Because any action you take now, it may have effect in future. So unless the future is there, in one unit time, the causality doesn't exist. That is how it is defined. But in practical way, there is always a concept. So time in Jainism is not a construct of mind, as you say. It is actually, it brings out very fundamental changes in everything else. Now I'll come to the samaya, the kalanu, how much it is, that is always a question of debate. But that, as I said, much smaller than, they say, Planck time. But they go up to, very systematically, as we make tables, up to avalika, which is 2 into 10 to minus 4 seconds. And then they don't give it anyway, the unit of samaya quantitatively. They say there is an innumerable samaya in one avalika. So that shows that it is not a fixed amount. It keeps on changing, and maybe it has something to do with spatial theory of relativity, that you can't define a unit time in a practical way. Okay. Now, as far as quantum entanglement, I come to the next one.
We'll discuss just a few minutes after, because we have one panelist already there.
Okay.
So, thank you.
So, I stop here.
Yeah.
Then.
Professor Sreekantan will make some comment. Maybe.
I just wanted to make a brief comment that according to Einstein, who started the thing at the beginning of last century, it became necessary to combine space and time into one concept. Without that, one cannot understand the constancy or the velocity of light. The most important experimental observation is velocity of light is independent of the motion of the observer or of the source. So, space and time got fused into a concept called space-time. But then how do they understand everything? Now, the way we understand it is space, because of evolutionary effect, we ourselves cannot envisage anything in the four-dimensional space, nor can we design any experiment to realize that the action is taking place in the four-dimensional space-time. So what we see and what we do is essentially a projection of what happens in four-dimensional space into three-dimensional space, and time flowing uniformly in one direction. At the same time, I must say, this uniformity of flow also is not permitted in three-dimensional space even, because if you go near a neutron star, time almost stops. Again, Einstein's theory of relativity tells us that the rate of flow of time depends upon the gravitational field and is different in different places.
Okay, thank you. Now, we know that in yoga philosophy, they practice breathing practices. So, maybe breathing practices and meditation, the atomic concept of time or instant is closely related. Now, our panelist in yoga philosophy, he can enlighten us.
Concept of time, place and causations are defined in terms of psychological binding factors in yoga. Yoga tells to go beyond all these things. As long as we are conditioned and limited by these factors, it is difficult to manage our own mind, because here, while defining all these factors, we take up sisterly philosophy like Sankhya, so that Sankhya and Yoga both go hand in hand while defining all these things. So, mind is the main factor here. So, going beyond mind, amani bhava, that is the main thing in this yogic practice, and that is the culmination of achievements. In this context, we have to study the concept of time, but according to Patanjali, it is nirvichara vaisharadya. That is the word he uses for gaining rutambhara prajna. This prajna, which is a climax of psychological achievements, where time, place and all these conditioning factors never have their own role to play. That condition, he tells, Adhyatma Prasada, it is what makes man to go to that Rutambhara. This Ruta, this word, it is to be understood. This Ruta, it is mainly very much conditioning factor, where time becomes a conditioning factor. For Naiyayikas, it is Sarvadhara Kalaha, it is Adhara. But for yogis, it is very much conditioning factor, because it is very much akin with the concept of Prakriti. As long as we are bound by Prakriti and Gunatraya, it is very difficult to go beyond mind. So that concept of mind, play, mind, time, place and causations, cause and effect theory, they are all conditioned by this mental condition. So conditioned mind, preoccupied mind causes, it makes time binding, not releasing. But Sankhya and Yoga, they take us to that level, where mind must be a releasing factor. For that, we have to go out of these clutches, this shell. In fact, pratiniyata desha kala nimitta kriya phala ashraya. Whatever happens here in this samsara, everywhere it is time, place, cause and effect, nimitta and activities, and ultimate intended result. These are 5 factors will be there. As long as we are enslaved to these 5, it is very difficult to go beyond. But ultimate aim of yoga is to go beyond that. That is why we have to go beyond these clutches. That is the main concept of it is not something independent concept, it is related to Prakriti Tattva and Manas Tattva.
Okay, thank you. And now we are going to the 4th issue, the quantum entanglement and metaphysics of relations. I mean, we have heard already yesterday that Einstein, along with collaborators Podolsky, Rosen, they published a very controversial paper normally called EPR paper, where they consider a kind of Gadankin or thought experiment, where the state of 2 quantum objects like electrons or any other elementary particle is prepared in such a way that when the state of one quantum object is altered, the other will be instantaneously change state to exactly the opposite of its partner, no matter how far they are being separated. And it is already experimentally verified in Switzerland by Nicholas Geshe and his team that even these quantum correlations, or we call non-locality, it holds even for more than 12 kilometers away. And quantum entanglement is a property of such a quantum state. It seems that the objects making an entangled state are constructed non-locally and are inseparable. This leads us to think that entanglement as a part of holism. Holism is considered as a thesis which claims that whole is more than sum of the parts, which means that 2 or more quantum objects, when entangled, can be stated as joint state of the quantum whole. One can conceive of intrinsic property of the quantum whole which does not supervene on intrinsic properties of the parts. In other words, the intrinsic property of the quantum whole or the relation between quantum objects making the whole contains the information about the relator. The relator do not necessarily need to have intrinsic property. Intrinsic properties are those qualitative properties that a thing has irrespective of whether or not there are other contingent things. All other qualities or properties are extrinsic or relational. So, characterizing the entanglement in terms of non-separability for quantum systems is a metaphysical proposal and a matter of philosophical arguments. In fact, the theories of relations have been discussed extensively in different Indian tradition. Aristotle, in his treatise The Categories, initiated a systematic investigation on the philosophy of relations. He suggested that whenever two or more objects or substances are related, that is to be explained by the inherent or intrinsic properties of the relator. Aristotelian thoughts made a tremendous influence on the philosophers of Middle Ages on the nature and ontological status of relations. Various schools of Indian philosophy, especially Buddhist Dharmakirti, Buddhist logicians, he wrote a very exciting and interesting book called Sambandha Pariksha or Philosophy of Relations. So our question for the dialogue is that Buddhist scholar Dharmakirti studied extensively about the reality of relations in his Philosophy of Relations or Sambandha Pariksha. Jain scholar also discussed about relations and its reality. Many other eminent scholars from traditions in Indian philosophy like Vedanta, Nyaya, they debated on the issue of reality of relations. So, what are the views on the reality of relations? The challenging issue is whether the relation is equally real as of relation. So, maybe Swami.
And claimed to be solved by Vedanta long ago. In fact, Swami Vivekananda in 1897, when he gave his famous lecture in Madras, he talks about this. I don't know whether he really was aware of any such discovery at that time. His exact statements are the following. He says, I need not tell you, graduates of the Madras presidency, that physics has proved that even materially we are one. Very funnily they say that if you lift a little finger, you disturb a star out there. The Vedantic idea that there's the huge ocean of matter, what they call the field, we are talking about the field, the idea of Akasha, and Vedanta recognizes three types of Akasha. One is the Mahakasha, in which objects are supposed to be existing, although Einstein said that objects don't exist in space. In fact, objects modify space. So in a sense, space and object space, time and matter are one continuum as we know now. And the second is the Chitta Akasha, in which the thoughts reside. The thoughts reside in a space which is we call the mind or whatever, and which we experience in dream state. And the other is the Chidakasha, which is the consciousness space, which is beyond in the state of deep sleep and beyond. Now, the idea is that even materially, all of us are interconnected through the Mahakasha. One simple example which we can now immediately understand is the internet and the mobile phones which we use. The moment you have you send a signal, you send a message, you send an SMS or you send an email, you upload it to the cosmic server and then it is downloaded somewhere from anybody can download it provided he knows the correct password. The password is the mantra of a particular person which he doesn't like to disclose to anybody else. So every thought of yours is actually uploaded to the cosmic mind. They call it the Hiranyagarbha. So the Vedantas have three layers. One is the cosmic material infinite, which is called the Virat. The second is the Hiranyagarbha, which is at the mental level, which is the cosmic mind. And the third is the Ishvara, which is at the level of the spirit. So physically we are one, intellectually and mentally we are one, and spiritually we are one. So the oneness which is percolating the famous Vedantic equation of the Atma Brahma Aikya, which is called the Mahavakya, the individual self is identical with the Supreme Self, according to Vedanta, actually percolates at three levels. One is the physical level as the individual, which is called the Vaishvanara, being identical with the Virat, which is the cosmic. At the intellectual level, the mental level, the Taijasa being identical with the Hiranyagarbha or the Mahat of the Sankhyan philosophy, and the Pragya being identical with the Ishvara at the spiritual level. So the idea is the microcosmic and the macrocosmic are two manifestations of the same reality, and therefore there is only one reality which manifests in the microcosm and the macrocosm. I'll just end with one experience that Swami Vivekananda himself had in Almora. He records it in his diary. He says, "Today I got the solution to one of the greatest problems of my life, and that is the identity of the microcosm and the macrocosm. I actually saw the entire universe in an atom. In that sense, the sense of interconnectedness of the entire body at the physical level, at the mental level, and the spiritual level, this interconnectedness is a corollary of the oneness of existence, or the solidarity of the universe, which is one of the most fundamental doctrines on which the entire Vedanta rests, being the Mahavakya, the great sayings, the Tattvamasi, the Aham Brahmasmi, Prajnanam Brahma, etc."
Okay, thank you. And we know that great Buddhist scholar Dharmakirti, his book Sambandha Pariksha, or Philosophy of Relations, with lot of debate among scholars, among different traditions, now even in Jain. So let me invite Geshe Dorji Damdul about Dharmakirti's view.
Okay, to be very direct, relation in Buddhist logic, it is of two kinds: sequential relation and concurrent relation. Sequential and concurrent. The relation is established into these two. Sequential relation connotes cause and effect, how the effects are related to the causes. This is sequential relation, this one. Then the other one is the concurrent or simultaneous relation, which means, say, for example, when I say, okay, I'm a little thirsty, let me have a glass of water. I lift this glass of water, it is my hand lifting it. So this hand is not me, but I am related to this hand. So these two are simultaneous. These two are not causal. So this is known as a simultaneous relation. Okay, so in this connection, then the question arises, where is this phenomenon known as the relation? Where is it? Say, when a hand lifts this up, the relation, is it on the hand or is with the self? Where is this? This is a question asked. So, likewise, as Professor Sisir rightly described, that there was so much of debate going between the Buddhist logicians, the Nyayik logicians, and also the Vaisheshiks, and the Jain logicians, and so forth. So, very interesting discussion which is happening, which I briefly touched the earlier sessions, was, say, when you look at a very beautiful flower, or let's say, now let me change the example. When you look at the forest, the same forest can be seen in two ways. One, when you go into the forest, you will not see the forest, you will see the individual trees. When you go out of the forest, then you will see the forest, you will not see the individual trees. So when you look at the hairs here, you don't see the individual hairs. You will see just, oh, there's hair there, the bunch. So, where is this? What is that relationship between the individual hairs and the bunch of the hairs, individual trees and the forest? What is that relationship? So these two are not sequentially related, these two are concurrently related. These two are simultaneously related. Now the question is, where is this relation, this phenomenon known as relation? Where does it exist? Does it exist as a substance or what? Then the opponents of our Dharmakirti, they would always propose the concept of substance. So this relation is something substance, which exists on all parts of the strains of the hairs, or all trees. This relation as a substance, it exists. Then Acharya Dharmakirti is saying that this relation, then if you tease apart, if you separate, if you distance these trees more, then what happens to the relation if it exists as substance? So then you will see that even the concept of the forest disappears. Then where is that phenomenon known as the relation if it is a substance? So this argument, and Acharya Dharmakirti coming up with the very strong position that this concept of relation, it exists not from the object as a substance, it exists as a imputational phenomena. So phenomena exists in two ways. One is as a substance from the object, and the other from the subject. So it is a subjective existence. Because it is subjective existence, you will not find it on the object as a substance. So this is about relation. And another very interesting topic raised here is the quantum entanglement. This amazing concept. In fact, say, although it sounds very simple. If I give you an example, it will sound simple. But in actuality, if you look for the complexity of the mechanism, then it's a very challenging for us. Say, for example, let's say if there's only one plant in this universe, which is right there outside this hall, if there's only one tree, then if I say, is that the further away tree or the nearer tree? It makes no sense. The moment you plant another tree in this universe, in India Gate, next to India Gate, then the moment I say, oh, which is the nearer tree? The one here. Then the moment the other tree is introduced simultaneously, this tree becomes the nearer tree. So this concept, so therefore we see as though like something has changed there. Nothing, no change has happened to this tree, but then simply because something else is introduced very far away from here, then simultaneously what is here is also becomes something different. So this is like a quantum entanglement. So this kind of concept is so well explained in Buddhism. And now the question is, how do you describe, how do you explain the mechanism? How do you account for this mechanism? So this again on the basis of understanding how things come into being, not necessarily from the object. From the object it remains the same tree. Yesterday, today, it's the same tree. But it is only when you bring in the subjective involvement, then the phenomena of the quantum entanglement, the relativity, all these phenomena come into being. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the issue is whether relation is a mental construct or relation is equally equally real as that of relator. Now I will request my friend in Jain philosophy, Professor Bhandari, what his views according to Jain philosophers.
Well, from Jain perspective, everything in the universe is related, inseparable, cannot exist in isolation, and is interdependent. I can only quote one sutra for the living beings that parasparopagraho jivanam, all life is interconnected, interdependent, and so on. And same thing in the Acharang Bhasyam, they say that if you know one, you know all. Now how you can know one without knowing all? So that is the kind of entanglement, everything is related or dependent, or you can say entangled with each other. So Jainism as such believes in relationship, and it is real, but in a relative way. It changes with various perspectives and so on. It is not absolute, and what is said is that when the relationship is very deep, then the relationship and relator, they merge in each other. That is how it is defined. So what I want to say is that in an absolute sense, the perspective is different, but in a relative sense, the Jainism believes that everything material and non-material, living and non-living, are all very intimately related. So it is a very very basic foundation of our existence, and I would just like to stop here.
Okay, thank you. Now let us listen whether Kashmiri Shaivism has anything to say in this regard.
Well, they have a lot to say about everything. Okay, now I want to I just want to start by quoting a lovely story. A lot of these scriptures are in a form of a dialogue between Shiva and Shakti, which is a hallmark of tantric texts. So in one of the texts, I forget the name, Devi asked Shiva, how does Anuttar, the unsurpassable consciousness, bring about identity between the empirical I? That is what how does it relate to this world, the phenomenal world, the perfect I consciousness of Shiva, so that one acquires ultimately sameness with universal power. So Shiva answers, Anuttar is twofold, has a twofold manifestation. One is Akasha Shunya, Khechari, moving in space. That is, he is non-referential consciousness, which is all pervasive. But at the same time, all referential consciousness and existential phenomena is a concretization of consciousness. So that is where the relationship comes. But of course, the story doesn't end here, because they have very definitive concepts of relationship. And I'll just summarize it. The first is interconnectedness, which is fantastic that it's in other systems as well. And there's a lovely saying, Sarvam Sarvatmakam. Everything is interrelated with everything else. So all the categories of creation are sustained by an internal dynamism, which is intrinsic. They are related, but they are also sustained and equilibrated. It's orderly. It's not a disordered world. The second is complementarity, as we saw in the two bindus, the white and red, Shiva and Shakti, male and female. And the complementarity is beautifully explained by the concept of avinabhava sambandha. It is taken from Nyaya, by the way, avinabhava sambandha. So what kind of sambandha? Sambandhas are of various kinds. I'm talking to you, this is a sambandha. I'm holding this table, this is a sambandha. They say, no, this is not the sambandha we are talking about. The two things just come together. They are entangled. I'm just using a scientific term. How are they entangled? What are the metaphors? The metaphors are just moon and moon rays, fire and heat, seed and tree. That is the way. You can't separate the two. So this is this avinabhava sambandha complementarity. Then the third is, again, I would call it a scientific principle, wholeness. Whole is made up of parts, and all parts inhere the whole. Because, and this concept comes out beautifully when you see the Sri Yantra, which is composed of 9 triangles, and then how those Shiva and Shakti triangles transform by coalescing, transform into 43 small triangles, which represent the 36 categories. So this idea of whole and part. And then the other important thing is that this relationship is a real relationship. It's not an illusion. So the source, the primal pulse of creation, spanda, its transformation into matter, material referential consciousness, is real as its source. So that is, so there's, I'll just quote something from Kalika Krama. Consciousness shines internally and externally in the form of its various objects, because this is all prameya, and we are the pramatris, and we are bound. Pramatris are bound by prameya through the mode of cognition, So there is no existence of the object apart from consciousness. Therefore, the world is consciousness. Objects are not known by anybody without consciousness. From this, it is determined that it is awareness that assumes the identity of all objects. So this is it. I have a lovely image from the National Museum, where I am now a Tagore scholar, working on the tantric, beautiful collection. I want to show it because that shows how they believe in the macrocosm and the microcosm are interwoven, Can we just see my slide? It's probably the last slide. If you just click. This is a masterpiece image, which is in the collection of National Museum. And it shows how the tantras, and this is also in Buddhism, the chakras and the tantras, the microcosmic and the macrocosmic, how they are related. This one. Now this is it's a masterpiece. This is about 30 feet long. And if you see, you can see the Shiva and Shakti. You have the red dot and the white dot. It's very predominant. Is it this way? Anyway, you can see the red dot and the white dot right at the bottom. And that's, is the other, sorry.
No.
This is the one? This is the
No.
It's the other way. Sorry. It's the other plus. You see this. This is the male and female principles, and then how the world originates from there, the aquatic life, etc. And these are the and then you have the human sphere, and these are the spheres beyond Sahasrara chakra. So basically, they also now here again, this is another painting which shows the unity of male and female. Now they also explain the origin of the cosmos to Kundalini Shakti, because Shiva and Shakti, the energy of the cosmos, the pulsation in the microcosm is known as Kundalini Shakti. So this shows the evolution of Kundalini Shaktis, through the chakras and how it's related, this energy is related, this vibration is related, and there are states beyond that moving into Shunya.
Okay, thank you. Now we can ask our friend from your perspective.
Here we have to take Sankhya philosophy to answer the question raised here. Because Sankhya and Yoga, they go hand in hand. They are dualistic in their nature. So Purusha is Purusha, and Prakriti got all the rules to play while performing in this material world, in this physical and relative world. Here we have all type of relations, and this very relation, it moves from subtle to gross level. That is how Prakritir Mahan Tatu Ahankaraha Tasmad Ganascha Shodashakaha Tasmad Api Shodashakat Panchabhyah Panchabhutani. That is how Ishvara Krishna in his Sankhya Karika, he tells how this world gets that tangible form, gross form. That we have to take for addressing many questions raised here. Main understanding here, it is very much dualistic. Chaitanya is Chaitanya and another one is Jada Jagat. So that is how we have to understand this animate and inanimate, these two things we have to understand. That is how the realistic understanding of gross and subtle world we can go for. Main thing is it is Satta. Satta concept, it is very important, because Sankhya philosophy, it tells everything which is experiential understanding and existential reality, experiential understanding and existential realities. These two go hand in hand. These two terminologies we have to understand. If we understand, we can answer this relative world, how it functions and how it has its own role to play in individual life also. That much I can share related to this particular point.
Okay. We have a lot of questions. So before going for the discussion session, Professor Sreekantan might remark something.
We all have had the excellent opportunity of getting a free copy of a book on science and Vedanta. The author of this book, Professor Sisir, is here. I asked him to come and give a brief introduction of the book, but he says no, it takes a lot of time. So I want to express on behalf of all of us our gratitude for his making the copy available to all those who are interested in his book. So, Professor Sisir.
Now I am giving my microphone to my colleague, Dr. Shivanand Kanavi, to moderate the discussion sessions. Okay. And it will be around 40 minutes.
This session is basically for the floor. So you are welcome to ask questions to any particular participant, any particular panelist, or if you want to make a comment, kindly keep it very brief because there are, I'm sure, a lot of people with a lot of questions. So, and bear with me if I interrupt your comments and so on, if I find them too long. So, can you please pass the mic, and you can come here and address your questions. And please identify yourself.
My name is Adolfo García de Sola. I'm a clinical psychologist from Spain. My question is for all the members of the board. How do you think, or you can say, about the Ashtavakra Gita? Thank you.
Vedanta-centered question it is, because Ashtavakra Gita, it is mainly dedicated for Advaitic understanding, non-dualistic understanding, it is for that one. So, Jivatma and Paramatma, this individual soul and universal soul, how they become identical when man goes beyond mind. That is the main journey there. It is portrayed. How man, starting from mental level, can proceed further beyond mind. That is the main core part of that Gita, Ashtavakra Gita. Actually, it is in many Gitas in Mahabharata. Their main focus, it is on that one. Man must go beyond mind. That is the central theme.
Good afternoon. My name is Priya Prasad, and my question is directed to Swami Atmapriyananda. Sir, science or scientists arrive at a knowledge or derive knowledge based on evidence, as they should. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had a Jonas Salk who cured polio. However, philosophy is a different approach to knowledge, which we cannot ignore. Having meditating myself, I know the effects and the impact it has on my life. Now, you're a scientist who became a monk. My question to you is there a sweet spot between science and the skeptics and the philosophers or the monks, where they can come together and somehow, and how did you do that? So that, I guess that is my question, that sweet spot between these two realms. So yes, thank you.
There are two kinds of knowledge which we derive. One is from the senses. Senses give us inputs, and from there we derive knowledge. And there's a symbolic knowledge which is which science always uses. There is a different kind of knowledge which is an intimate knowledge, which you just know what it is, but you can't define it, you can't conceptualize it, you can't put... For example, suppose somebody asks you, define time. Everybody knows what is time, but you can't define what is time because you are in it. You can't define yourself because you are it. There's a different kind of knowledge in which you intuitively feel something to be true, feel something to be real, but you can't conceptualize it, you can't analyze it. So analytical knowledge is something which science goes for, and everything in the world doesn't come through analysis. The famous book by Arthur Eddington is a very old book which was studied in school. Last chapter in Science and Mysticism, he gives a very simple example. There is a scientific knowledge which comes through analysis, and there is a different kind of knowledge which comes intimately. He gives example of a joke, a humor, sense of humor. Suppose somebody tells you it's a joke, then as a scientist you would ask, come on, tell me what's a joke. You have the characteristics of a joke, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If these characteristics are satisfied, it is really and truly a joke. I tell you a joke, wait, I'm a scientist. I will find out whether it is a joke. You go on analyzing the joke. At the end of it, you come to the clear conclusion, yes, it is really and truly a joke. Next, laugh. By the time you have analyzed the joke, the tendency to laugh is gone. So he says beautifully that the analysis of a joke retains all the characteristics of a joke except its laughableness. It just doesn't do to analyze a joke. You react to it spontaneously. So there are certain people who have some intuitive feeling about God, something which is beyond the mind. You can't really put it analytically except by saying that I feel it is true. And if suppose you say that you feel it is true, it may not be true. If it satisfies him, and if it gives him happiness, it gives him universal joy, and it gives him oneness with the universe, why not? Let him be happy. So let the scientist be unhappy with his analysis, and let the philosopher be happy with his synthesis. Why not? So the idea is everything cannot be analytically proven. You know the famous story about Ramanujan, Srinivasa Ramanujan. Hardy, his mentor, asked him, Ramanujan, how do you get these? What are the proof of these theorems? He said, sir, proof I see, I know it, they are true. Beyond that, he can't say anything. Then how do you get these theorems? Where do you get them from? He said, my Kuladevata, goddess of Namakkal in Tanjavur in Tamil Nadu, she comes and tells me these theorems and I write down. Then Hardy said, this boy is really and truly a mathematical genius, but hopelessly religious.
My name is Girisha. My question is for all the panelists. We discussed a lot about the time. One aspect of time that is a bit weird is that we always feel that it flows in the forward direction. I mean, that's how we feel. In physics, we use the second law of thermodynamics to explain why it could be so. What do the various schools of philosophy have got to say? Why do we feel the time to be in that? Why does it flow the way it does for us?
Time flows now, it's already there. The organizer looking at the clock, time flows. And time flows from the past through the present into the future. Why did God create the way that He created time? We do not know. But time has a definite arrow. There are three arrows of time, as you know in physics. One is the arrow of time, the other is the arrow of entropy. Entropy always, in a closed system, entropy always increases, as you know, and the universe expands. So you are asking why God made time flow in one direction? Or
no, I didn't ask why God created that way, but is there anything that the various schools
That's the way it is. It's just like asking why did God make the electron negative and proton positive? He did it that way.
I think his question is whether there is something similar in the traditions that you all represent. That there is unidirectional time.
Okay. In fact, from what I mentioned earlier, this is a very important point. Say, when you look at the same object, the plant, you see it as plant. And then the same object through electron with the different the vision, then you will see in the form of molecules. When you experience the molecular level, then experience the concept of the plant dissolves. Likewise, we can do the same thing with time. So time can be seen in one perspective. From that point of view, the time flows in arrow, is the arrow of time. It doesn't flow back. Whereas when you go look at the same time, the way we look at the plant on the molecular level, just as the plant dissolves, even the time dissolves. In that experience, not only time dissolves, all phenomena dissolves. So when you really experience that, this is the moksha. This is where you experience that all your sickness, aging, death, all which flow in time dissolves. So that is the moksha. Thank you.
Can I just add to this? Yeah, I think, one of the things about this form of Shastra that we are discussing is that, you have to look at it and interpret it hermeneutically. So one of the ways in looking at time is, when you look at the Vedas, there's a notion of Rita. Rita is a cosmic order. That is, it's a very important concept, Ritam and Satyam. So there is an ecological argument on the basis of which time can be understood. I would call it an ecological argument, that, these seers saw the universe dissolving, and along with that, they saw certain aspects of consciousness disappearing and appearing, So there is that ecological point of view, that a lot of our philosophy is derived from that, but we don't connect the two.
Deshmukh, I'm a neurologist. I feel in this great symposium, one chair is missing, and that is the chair for neurobiology. There is a lot of very interesting information in neurobiology, which can explain most of the things that have been discussed. I will address only two aspects of this. One is the concept of spanda. Spanda means impulse. And that impulse has a neurobiological basis, cardiorespiratory impulse. Every time the heart beats, blood is pulsated through the whole body, through the brainstem. Brainstem has a network, which is called a homeostatic network, that maintains our body at health, everything in equilibrium. And then this homeostatic network stimulates the reticular activating system, which then generates conscious arousal, an impulse of conscious arousal. That conscious arousal becomes conscious awareness. Conscious awareness, when directed, becomes conscious attention. So this conscious arousal and awareness is the matrix of attention. From this matrix emerges the conscious vector, which then creates subject-object duality and our experience. And then, with the development of memory, especially the working memory in the cortex, we generate the experience of sequencing, one event, the next, the next, the next, which creates the sense of time. Now, I also want to briefly comment about the sense of time. In the hypothalamus, there is a nucleus called suprachiasmatic nucleus, which continuously monitors the whole cosmic influences. The lunar cycle, the solar cycle, the seasonal cycles, the whole thing is monitored by the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and that defines the rhythms of the whole body. And the body and the brain has rhythms from 1 millisecond, which is a spike, neural spike, to the whole lifespan. Somebody talked about time's particle. I think we can also think of time as time waves. And if you consider time waves, then the whole biggest time wave is, of course, 13.3 billion or whatever the life of the universe itself, or the individual life. I just want to say that all these facts can be experienced by we human beings. And there have been great examples of these experiences. For example, Swami Swarupananda of Powers, he says, Akhanda antari sahasa spurana, tethe thevi mana Swami mane. Akhanda antari, there is a continuous spurana or impulse or wellspring that is within your heart. And listen to it, and you will understand the whole phenomenon of life and mind. And also one more quote from Atmabodh by Adi Shankaracharya. Upadhi vilayat Vishnu, nirvishesham vished munihi, jalet jalam vyat vyomni, tejas tejasi vayatha. When all the superficialities and mental activity goes away, then there is an integration from the drop of water to the ocean, or small quantum space to the infinite space, or small quantum energy to the infinite energy. In neuroscience now, in one of my lecture, we conceive of 3 clocks.
Excuse me, can you?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll leave it there.
I think
Thank you.
it's sufficient.
Yeah.
Since it's a comment, yeah.
Dr. Kanavi, can I just ask him one clarification?
Yeah.
Or, to Vinod. You know that in the atomic scale of brain is ion channel, and ions are propagating from just only on directions. So can I say that arrow of time or direction at the time is inbuilt in our brain function?
Yes, that is true. The whole body is influenced by.
Yes.
My name is Hello. My name is Ranjit, and I am a student of Buddhism. And I thought I would like to offer a small story from the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is very popular in East Asian Buddhism, where they spend that may sit extremely well with the scientists as well as with the other panel. Here they talk of a metaphor that there is the god Indra, and the god Indra has thrown a net all over the universe. And in each knot of the net, there is a jewel. And each jewel reflects each other jewel in itself. So not only does it reflect each other jewel, it is also reflected in each other jewel. So you see this interdependence, quantum entanglement, and it sits extremely well with current ecology and postmodernism. I just thought I'll offer it up to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My name is Shumantran Rai from IIT. So I have two interrelated questions, and I'll try to make it as focused as possible. The first question relates to the fundamental problem of the precise interrelation between mind consciousness on the one hand, and on the other hand, matter. Mainly I'm asking this to physicists, but the classical conception of matter probably has undergone a lot of change, because in quantum mechanics, you basically deal with psi, which is a probability amplitude. So now what is the fundamental, ontological constituent of this universe? What is the new and validated concept of matter, and which is more fundamental? Because do we need to revise the traditional materialist concept that mind and thoughts and consciousness is a result of the interaction of the neural networks, and therefore when you pass away and your system, bodily system disintegrates, your personal consciousness is no longer going to be there? Does that require any sort of revision? What is the fundamental conception of matter, and at which scale, from which theoretical perspective? So if you can kindly address this.
Yeah, we have physicists in our panel, list of panelists. So if they can write, or otherwise I will.
Yeah, later basically.
Okay, you know that if you look at from ontological viewpoint, the concept of quantum vacuum, so we try to understand the quantum fields and their interactions. And this quantum vacuum, it consists of kind of imprints or attributes of the quantum fields, like electromagnetic fields or other kind, electron field or others. So there is a substratum which is physical. This substratum is not beyond space and time. But if you look at the pure consciousness, it is supposed to be beyond space and time. So we have a pure reality or substratum which has kind of physical characteristics. But there the problem is how the different attributes of the physical fields come out of the fluctuations. That problem is not yet solved. And if you only look at the property of quantum vacuum, it's self-referential, self-organizing. So in a sense, again, some of its properties are like properties of consciousness itself.
Between like constancy, stasis, or structures which are eternal, okay? And on the other hand, like Whitehead's process philosophy, where certain structures emerge out of interaction between multiple entities. I would like to ask if I'm right to say that Vedanta kind of focuses or sort of assumes but does not prove an eternal, unchanging, fundamental kind of reality, whereas in Buddhism it is like patitta samutpada, where there are multiple factors interacting to give rise to codependent origination. So, which side is more reasonable given our, not our assumptions, but our validated, scientific knowledge?
Yeah, this is very, very interesting question.
This may be for, both Dr. Atmapriyananda and Dr. Geshe.
Okay, before that, let me tell you from scientific perspective what we got, what we achieved it. Very recently, we found that very existence of the fundamental constants in nature, like speed of light, gravitational constant, and Planck constant, that very existence says that the conscious activities of the brain should be there in this universe. So this is like a kind of dependent existence, not dependent origination. So if you look Pratitya Samutpada, sometimes they say also dependent existence. Now our experts in panel, they can elaborate the issue.
Whether change will go first or constancy will go first is a big argument between us. The fundamental argument in whether it is philosophy or science, even common sense, which is more fundamental? Is it change or is it rest? Buddhism said everything is changing. It's what we find in nature. Everything is rotating, everything is changing, and everything is in a rotational motion. As you know, the rotational motion is equivalent to simple harmonic motion. There is a spandana, there is a vibration, there is motion everywhere. There is nothing, no particle in the universe which is at rest. And Vedanta says, if everything is changing, who sees this change? Is the person who is looking at this change is also changing?
He is, according to biology, because many of the cells are replaced after a certain time period. So what is being conserved is not individual.
So if he is also changing, what is the guarantee that what he sees as change is right? Because by the time he sees the change, he has changed already. It is just like, I'll tell you a small joke without offending you. There is it's a joke. There is a person who was a drunkard. He wanted to take a loan from somebody, and someone told him, see, you please give us a loan. Then what is the guarantee that you'll give it back? There's no, don't worry, I'll definitely give it back. After a couple of weeks, he said, give me back the loan. No, I didn't take any loan from you. No, I knew that you will go lie. Then where did you take the loan from? I took the loan from the place where a bull was sitting there. So the bull is sitting here, now give me back the loan. The bull was sitting somewhere else, and the bull has changed his place and come somewhere else. So suppose the person who is looking at the change himself is changing. What is the guarantee that the change which he is looking at itself is not true? So these are very complicated questions actually. And therefore Buddhism has solved this problem once again. Our friend will be able to elaborate more on the Pratitya Samutpada. And J. Krishnamurti in the modern times and Ramana Maharshi to some extent have elaborated this. See, thought continuously moves. I am looking at the psychological point of view. There's a continuation of thought. Every moment a thought arises and falls. Now, where is the thinker? The one statement is, thought being insecure wants to project a thinker out of itself to produce some kind of a security. And thought being conditioned by the thinker being conditioned by the thought, which is constantly moving, the thinker itself is a constant evolute from the thought. He rises with the thought and falls with the thought. So Ramana Maharshi's idea is that every point of time when you have a thought, there is an ego which is associated with the thought, which is the I think, and with the thought subside, the ego is also subsiding. So this continuity of the movement of this thought as a whole gives you the feeling, the illusion of the continuity of the self. There is a Buddhistic idea, the Alada Chakravarti, etc., etc. But Vedanta will say, but the entire thing as a whole, where will it move? Suppose you say movement is fundamental, you take the entire universe, where the space in which the entire universe would move. And therefore, there should be a whole which does not change, or in which the concept of change and changelessness itself vanishes. You can't say it changes because it has changed with respect to something else. And you can't say it does not change because the concept of change itself doesn't arise when there is a completeness or a whole. So the changelessness in a sense coalesces, And Vedanta therefore says, there comes a point of time in a man's life, in his evolution and of thought and through inwardness and through meditation and heightened awareness, in which he goes beyond the idea of change as well as changelessness. Both change and changelessness arise as concepts from the mind, and when you transcend the mind, the idea of change and changelessness, both of them will cease, and therefore you don't say whether change is the fundamental reality, the Atman, the ultimate reality does not change, because if you think of change in space-time, it is not that kind of changelessness. The Atman, the supreme reality, is not changeless in the sense that it is opposed to change. It is changeless as beyond space-time, and therefore the concept of changeless and change itself vanishes. Yeah, you want to say.
Okay, there are two things happening here. One is, let me correct what Atmapriyananda said. In Buddhism, it is not true that everything is permanent. That's not true. Because within Buddhism, I said very clearly that everything that exists can be classified into two. One which is impermanent, changing, and the other one which is unchanging. So this, keep in mind that this is a very basic framework of Buddhist philosophy. So one thing. And then the other one in terms of the change. So say the person, who is that person who did that and now who has experienced the result? So this question asked. So here it is very important to keep in mind that, for example, all of us, we are like, say, I don't think there is anyone who is below 20. Let's say 20 plus. 20 plus. Then if somebody asks you, okay, say, where did you do your school? Where did you do the kindergarten? Oh, I did it in school A. But then you're already a very old person. You're already 20 plus. How come that you attended such a school, kindergarten school? You're already 20 plus. Okay, so here the change is there. This is so obvious. That person who gives answer that I went to this school when I was 5 years old. When you say that, this person who gave the answer knows it's so obvious that there's a change. I was very young then. I was very cute then. Now I'm not cute. So this change is so obvious. Even the person who gives the answer knows that. At the same time, if you say that no, these are two different persons, this is totally a disaster. It contradicts all the conventional norms. So finally, what for we have to study all these things, what for we have to establish all this philosophy and these things, is finally to make our life easier, to give a lasting happiness. So now from that point of view, how do you account for this self, the same self which went to class 5, now finish all the class 5, this is known as the continuum. This is explained on the basis of what is known as continuum. This is so important concept. Without establishing this concept, then you will be trapped in all internal contradictions. So with the continuum, we say I. So this I, which exists in the past, present, and future. So this I has been changing. Earlier it was very young and very cute. And now it's not as cute. Then later on it's going to be even older. But all through the way, there is what is known as the I which pervades. So this is explained on the basis of the continuum.
Is it Alaya Vijnana?
No. Alaya Vijnana is believed by one of the lowest schools of Buddhism. So this concept of the I, the self, which exists in all three times, at the same time changing. So therefore, there is no contradiction in saying that the self changes, at the same time the self is accountable for all the causes which one has engaged in earlier and now experienced the result. There is no contradiction.
I'll just make one point. I think we are talking in two voices. See, Vedanta accepts change and changelessness in the following way. The kind of change you are talking about, which is called pravaha patita nitya, and that is not the kind of changelessness about which Vedanta talks about the Atman. The Atman is absolutely changeless in time, in space. It's beyond time and space, is absolutely changeless. Not that this kind of change and changeless as component. Pravaha patita nitya, it means the following. Suppose you are taking bath in a river. in Ganges, for example, and then after the next day somebody else, you go and take bath. How, did you take bath in the Ganges? Of course I did. Was it the same water in which you took bath yesterday? No, the water has moved, but the Ganges is still there. The flow of the Ganges as a flow is supposed to be changeless in the way he was talking about. That is not the way in which Vedanta talks about Atman. It is not the pravahapatita nitya. Samsara, the world, is nitya, is changeless in this sense that is continuously flowing. But the Vedantic changelessness is absolutely and irrevocably and totally, completely changeless and is beyond time and space. So the kind of change you are talking, changelessness component you are trying to insert into this, Vedanta knows it very well as a pravahapatita change. It is of course change. And it appears to be unchanging because you have the identity at a continuum. The continuum of change is not the absolute changelessness which Vedanta talks about.
Abhadita Satya.
Abhadita Satya.
That is correct.
Trikala Abhadita Satya is what we talk about.
Yes.
Can I?
There are at least 4 more questions, and there are only 10 more minutes. 10
So
more minutes for this
my
Q&A.
question is very, very
so kindly,
short. Yes.
Kindly keep
this
it
is my name is Anil Rajvanshi. I am an observer. I have been observing consciousness of all the participants for the last 3 days. So I am not going to ask any profound questions. This question is for Swamiji. There is an indication that Swami Vivekananda met Tesla, Nikola Tesla. Is there anything written up on that, either from Vivekananda Ashram, etc., or from the other side?
And he is going to give a scientific demonstration. If that happens, mathematical demonstration, he says. And if that happens, Sankhyan cosmology would have been put on a very firm foundation. Swamiji was thinking of writing a book on the ancient Sankhyan cosmology vis-a-vis the modern science, and he somehow felt the Sankhyan cosmology comes closest to science. What exactly transpired between them is not known, except the mention that he says that Tesla is going to give a mathematical demonstration.
Yes, sir.
Alex Hankey. I should like to start by thanking Professor Sisir Roy and Professor Sreekantan and Professor Sangeetha Menon so much for organizing such a wonderful conference and a wonderful symposium for us all to participate in. Thank you so much. I just want to make a brief comment. I've been studying the relationship between the Vedic sciences and the modern sciences at my teacher's instructions since 1973. I've come to the conclusion that the Vedic sciences are far in advance of the modern sciences for a very simple reason. The Vedic sciences distinguish between the stula, the gross levels that are open to perception, and the sukshma levels which are not open to gross sensory perception, but which can be perceived in advanced yogic states based on the development of consciousness. The sukshma states control the stula states, and therefore anything which you can perform on a sukshma level is bound to be more powerful than anything which is restricted to the stula level. So the Vedic sciences, the Vedic technologies are absolutely bound to be more powerful and in advance of the modern sciences. Having said that, I have arrived slowly at the conclusion that many of the sukshma activities are located at instability points in various systems. Most matter is stable. When something becomes unstable, it gives variable responses, as physiological systems do to repeated stimuli. So, as far as I can tell, the secret of sukshma abilities lies at developing the instabilities to a much greater extent and stabilizing them. And this seems to be the purpose of meditation programs which activate Ritambhara Pragya, which was mentioned, and other states in which many different things can be cognized, deeper things can be understood, and the Vedic sciences reach their culmination. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Yes, please. You are?
Yeah.
Okay.
My name is Manikumar. and I have been studying electrical networks of human nervous system. Mine is not a question. While Madhu ma'am was mentioning about 7 chakras, I got something into my mind. As all the electrical devices in this room have a ground connection, the same way all the electrical networks of human nervous system have 7 grounds actually. We use those 7 grounds in order to get the exact electrical measurements of our responses. Amazingly, these 7 chakras positions are exactly matched with the 7 grounds of our human electrical networks. In general, yoga and meditation practices stabilizes the vibrations of these 7 chakras. That's what people usually say. I think there is a concept called ground stabilization in electrical theories. That is, in order to put the ground at 0 volts, we need some such sort of stabilization exercise. I think this is such a valuable input. I think this will be this will offer a new window in order to look into the consciousness. Thank you so much.
Can I? Thank you very much. This is really news to me, and I think we can collaborate on it because there's extensive literature on the Kundalini Shakti and how it rises. But I just want to point out that there are different systems, even within Kashmir Shaivism. Some believe in 9, but 7 is the standard. 7 chakras is a standard system which is accepted. Other traditions have more chakras, but that's another framework.
Chakras?
They have Shat, but with the crown, with the Sahasrar, it's 7.
6 plus 1.
You don't. Sahasrar is that which connects you to the higher levels of consciousness. Yeah. What I just had a comment to make, with your permission, because I've been hearing these wonderful observations. You see, basically, what it is that when you in the Upanishads, there's a description of the Panchakoshas, that we are all composed of 5 sheets. The corporeal frame, then the body of pran, then the body of the manas, mind, then vigyan, and finally body of bliss. So basically the way I got the message when I first read it is that, every human being has a capacity to look at the world in 5 different ways. You can look at it in corporeal, you can look at it as prana, just as vibrations. You can look at it through the mind and split it apart as the scientists do. Vijnana is intuitive perception, and bliss is even higher than that. So for instance, I often tell my students, I said, if you touch that bliss within yourself and you see 2 people fighting, you will not fight back if somebody fights with you, because you're in bliss and you will be, sharing that bliss. So this 5 levels of consciousness and 5 perspectives is important, because the intuitive and the rational has to be integrated. I think we've reached that moment in history. And Fritjof Capra made a very interesting statement. He says science doesn't need philosophy, or philosophy doesn't need science, but humans need both. Because one, you can't just separate. So therefore, I want to thank you for creating this forum and the audience, and of course, Sangeetha. Thank you.
I'm Krishna Swami. The time crunch chases me, of course. I have modalities question, organizing questions, so it is non-technical, so to say. The understanding of consciousness vis-a-vis the interconnectedness and the entanglement of quartz, that is one thing. The dynamic dance of Shiva, the dynamic equilibrium of Shiva was in an enthralling manner projected by a group from CERN, CERN, European Center for the Nuclear Research, last week in Delhi. I had the opportunity to attend that, and it was fantastic. A Swiss troupe from various nations, individuals from various nations, 6 people, had a terrific dance. We call them particles, subatomic particles. Like that, can we have a dynamic Eastern type of kind of dynamic dance arranged? This is for Kanaji. Can we arrange a unique way of presenting a dance like them, lecture demonstration?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
We can arrange.
The thing is, if you read the Natya Shastra, the theory of dance, one of the things that comes through is that all movement is held by a still axis. So in all the postures of Bharatnatyam, it is true that there is a still axis which is balancing the movement.
So we can arrange a program, I thought. This is one thing.
Is that cosmic dance of Shiva?
Yeah, exactly.
That is what
Natraja.
Opera has projected that one. He has elaborated very well. That we can understand very well. Because that vibration, Mahakampana, every time it is going on, that we can have it. Because every particle is vibrating.
And we have overwhelming theoretical basis and a great number of dancers and dancers, male dancers also, who can do that, number one.
Tandav.
Number two, the final, thank you.
Shiva Tandav.
Shiva Tandav. I would like Professor Bhandari to answer this. It's a sad state of affairs in our country that monuments are not cherished and properly kept, organized. We all know that it's nothing, not a secret for Indians, number one. Number two, in Vijayamangala, a village, a rich village near Erode district, from where I come, near that I am living, the Vijayamangala temple, Jaina temple, is in ruins. But it's a beautiful temple, a medieval temple. Archaeologically speaking, it's certainly a medieval temple. And apart from no pujas, no worship, and probably the crows, ants, etc., the animal kingdom have a say there. And very few human beings go there even for a week, even on a weekly basis. Some people like me, yearly once we go, and the whole sanctity is lost. We somehow have to have a system by which we can pressurize the government, being activists in some way or the other, to better bring about a change in such ruins of temples, whether Jaina or whichever religion, Jaina or whichever religion. This is for Professor Bhandari to act upon, not only to answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll think about this.
Okay, now we are almost at the end of it. Professor Menon also, Sangeetha Menon also asked me to say a few words. So I came here to attend the conference, and I was asked to be also part of the symposium. I came here to listen to all of you. I come from a theoretical physics background, who later became a journalist. So I am more interested in communicating ideas, trying to understand complex ideas and communicate them. And from the background of physics, yesterday Professor Jha called all of us Charvakas, and who don't believe in the Atman and that everything arises from matter, etc. But however that be, I with a brief introduction to various traditions in Indian philosophy, I thought that various concepts very striking. I mean, I'm not talking about complete schemas and theories and systems, but there are the concepts, some of the concepts, for example, the Sankhya theory of Srishti, of Prakriti or Pradhana and Purusha, that there is both are Nitya, both are eternal, but as they say, one cannot act without the other. In fact, they give the concept of the lame and the blind, leading to the Srishti. I found very interesting. Similarly, the concept of Svabhavavada in Sankhya, which is very similar to law of nature. I mean, finally, if something is going in an elliptical orbit, why is it going in an elliptical orbit? I mean, it is its nature. You can say law of nature, you can say 1 over r squared, but why 1 over r squared? So finally you say that is the way it is. That is Svabhava. And this whole concept of one cause, we know that complex phenomena, whether it is in many-body theory, many-body physics, or in societal phenomena, that not a single cause leads to a single effect. So many causes leading to an effect, that is what I understand as Pratitya Samutpada. I think is a great concept which we find verified and talked about in many-body physics and so on. And similarly, the atomistic theories, whether they come from Vaiseshika or Jaina or Ajivika, I mean the great contributions, because you can talk about, if you have to stop somewhere, that you cannot have anything infinitely divisible. The moment you have something infinitely divisible, then how do you compare two things? What is the difference between, as they say, a stone and a mountain? Both have Paramanu, but if both have uncountable infinity of Paramanu, why is something smaller and something is bigger? So that you can measure things, weigh things, means there is discreteness at the bottom of nature, which is what we are talking about. So it is very interesting to hear about Kalanu and Pradesha and all these types of atoms of time, atoms of space, and of course matter as well. And similarly, the fact that nothing, the Newtonian concepts of absolute space, time, rest, motion being, we know that in modern physics that we don't accept them, that there is motion everywhere, there is zero-point energy, there is vacuum fluctuations, etc., etc. And it's so, it resonates so much with so much of the Indian concepts. For example, Jagatyam Jagat, that everything is moving. The whole Jagat is defined as something which is in motion in Ishopanishad. And similarly, the very concept of not taking something in blindly, but using pramanas, the various pramanas to prove it. So prameya. So all this, I think this from the Nyaya Vaiseshika, from the what is jointly called Tarka. And I think these are so appealing to a scientist that even if you do not accept, or even if you do not understand many of the other concepts, that some of these things conceptually, methodologically, I think are highly appealing, which makes us, people like me, look at tradition without prejudice and try to understand it on its own terms, before trying to compare and criticize and call something idealist, materialist, etc., etc., which looks very mechanical kind of category. Lastly, I think something which is very, very important for scientific discussion and even for a social democratic way of living is this whole humility and mutual respect, which is expressed in the parable of blind men describing the elephant, and which Anekantavada talks about it, that every aspect, that whole relativism that is expected, that is expressed in that relativism of truth, that everything is a point of view, and even if you integrate all of them, you might end up with something which is not really the elephant. So you will only asymptotically reach the reality, asymptotically reach the truth, the elephant, and that is a hope. But that itself demolishes all kinds of absolutism. And with absolutism, there cannot be any democracy. If you say this is the truth and I have monopoly over truth, then that is the end of it. So the very fact that there is this approach in traditional Indian systems that there has to be mutual respect and that humility, that this is our view and we are ready to listen to your view, and maybe we'll learn from each other, adapt, and so on, I think is a great sustainer of both scientific development as well as our own social existence as a diverse society. Thank you very much. And before, I would just like to say that this is a wonderful interaction. I missed earlier parts of the conference, but yesterday I attended some of them, and today's symposium was fantastic. So I heartily thank Professor Menon and Nias for organizing this wonderful thing, and of course all the sponsors who really supported it, and I'm very glad to see so many of them supporting this kind of a conference. Thank you very much. And I think Professor Menon is going to make some concluding remarks. That's what.
So I think now we are almost at the end, and Professor Sangeetha Menon will give a concluding address, concluding of the whole conference, starting from 9 to 12. So, Professor Menon.
Well, I will end with a few lines. We have been listening to various lectures, various expert expositions since the last 3 days of conference and today's symposium of debate and debate between various schools and physics. Well, I'll make it short, at least to my impression, in my humble opinion, and I'm sure everybody would have their own ways of assimilating what we have heard in the last 4 days. So this is my own personal assimilation. I think it's very important in today's juncture where we are to have big questions, because the big questions give us hope, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama said on the 6th December speech. So it's very important to have big questions without leading to any concrete answers, but just the big questions which allow us to dream better, imagine better. But that's one side of the story. The second side of the story is equally important. It's very important for us to have concrete experimental work, concrete scientific data, very distinct and clear methodologies, and clarity about concepts we use, and an honest inquiry. And I think these two are equally important, because finally, at least in this field of consciousness studies, we are talking about self-transformation. And I think this is something which we cannot forget. Finally, we are all talking about each one of us. It has something to do with us. I think this has been, for me, it has been a great experience, and I thoroughly enjoyed meeting all of you, and thank everyone for coming from various countries, traveling several hours of flight, and traveling from various cities of this country and being here. So thanks to all of you. Well, I also wish to thank a very strong support team behind this conference. So I don't have everybody here, but I have one or two people. But primarily, I wish to thank Mr. P. Srinivasa Aital, who is the head of the administration and accounts, who was working behind to make it a successful event. I thank everyone, each one of you. I also thank, since he is here, Mr. Ramesh, who was working behind the audio video, Mr. Kumar, Shiv Kumar, and all others. So there are several others, but I'm not naming them. But there are several others who worked very hard for almost 11 months to make this conference a success. Thank you all. Thank you very much, and bon voyage for who are taking a longer flight, and safe travels to everyone. Be well.